She didn't ask for recognition, didn't demand respect, just showed up every morning at 4:15 a.m. before most of the air wing was even awake, and did the job no one else wanted. Grease under her nails, hydraulic fluid on her coveralls, and a silence that made the deck crew uncomfortable. They mocked her quietly, whispered when she passed, questioned why she was even there. Until one night, when the entire strike package was grounded by cascading equipment failures, and a cocky FA-18 pilot refused to launch unless she personally signed off on his jet. That's when someone noticed the tattoo behind her ear. A call sign, one that shouldn't exist. One that only belonged to legends who were supposed to be dead. Welcome to the human stories. Before we reveal who she really was, don't forget to subscribe and tell us which country and city you're watching from. The USS Abraham. Lincoln sat 240 nautical miles off the coast, slicing through dark water under a moonless sky. The carrier's island superstructure glowed faint red. Night ops protocol. No white lights to compromise the strike team's vision. On the flight deck, 18 FA-18 Super Hornets sat chained to the steel. Engines cold, ordnance loaded, pilots already in their ready rooms reviewing mission parameters. The launch window opened at 2:30 a.m. It was now 1:47 a.m. in Hangar Bay 2. 3 levels below the flight deck, aviation machinists, mate, second class, Rena Keller, worked alone. She was small, maybe 5'4", with short dark hair tied back in a tight bun, grease smeared across her left cheek. Her coveralls were 2 sizes too big, navy issue grey with her last name stenciled across the back in faded black letters. She didn't wear jewelry, didn't wear makeup, just a plain black watch on her left wrist and a tool belt that looked older than her. Service record. She was running diagnostics on a hydraulic actuator assembly pulled from Hornet 311. The aircraft assigned to Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen, call sign Reaper. The actuator controlled the jet's tail hook, the critical component that caught the arresting wire during carrier landings. If it failed, the pilot would miss the wire, overshoot the deck, and either crash into the ocean or eject at 150 knots. Neither option was survivable in night conditions. The senior maintenance chief had cleared the part 3 hours ago. Signed off, green light. But Keller wasn't satisfied. She'd noticed a microfracture in the piston housing during a routine visual inspection. Barely visible under standard lighting, but unmistakable under her UV panel. The kind of flaw that wouldn't show up on diagnostics until it was too late. She flagged it. The chief dismissed her, told her to stop wasting time, told her the pilot was already briefed and the mission timeline was locked. She didn't argue, just submitted a formal maintenance discrepancy report, tagged the actuator as code red, unsafe for flight, and walked away. At 2:03 a.m., the air boss called down from the tower. Launch sequence initiating. All aircraft status green. Deck crew scrambled topside, yellow shirts guiding jets into position, red shirts loading final ordnance checks, green shirts managing catapult hookups. The noise was deafening, even 3 decks down. Jet engines spooling, steam hissing from catapult pistons. Radio chatter crackling through helmets COMM's dot. Then the call came. Hornet 311, status hold. Pilot refusing pre-dash launch. The carrier air group commander, a senior Navy captain with 22 years of flight operations, stormed into the ready room. Lieutenant Commander Chen was still seated, helmet off, arms crossed. His wingman stood beside him, confused, annoyed. The CAG's voice cut through the room. What the hell is this, Reaper? We have a launch window closing in 19 minutes. Chen didn't move. Sir, I need confirmation that AMM2 Keller signed off on my tailhook assembly. Not the chief heard. The CAG blinked. She's E5. She doesn't have final authority. Chen stood slowly. Then get her authority. Because I'm not launching until she clears that jet. Silence. The other pilots stared. No one refused launch over a junior mechanic's opinion. Not in the middle of a strike package. Not with a 4-star admiral monitoring from the Pentagon. Not ever. But Chen didn't back down. And that's when someone remembered. 3 months ago, Keller had flagged a fuel line connector on another pilot's Hornet. The senior inspector overrode her. The jet launched. 18 minutes into the mission, the fuel line ruptured. The pilot barely made it back, landing on fumes with 90 seconds of fuel remaining. If he'd been over hostile territory, he would have ejected into enemy hands. Keller had saved his life, and no one had thanked her. At 2:11 a.m., the CAG made the call. Bring her up. Keller climbed the 3 flights of stairs to the flight deck. Tool bag over her shoulder, flashlight clipped to her belt. The wind hit her face the moment she stepped outside, 40 knots of salt spray and jet exhaust. She walked across the deck without hesitation, past the deck crew, past the arresting gear, straight to Hornet 311. Chen was already standing beside the jet, helmet under his arm. He didn't say anything at first. Just watched her work. She dropped to one knee, pulled the UV light from her belt, and re-inspected the tailhook actuator housing. The microfracture was still there, barely visible, but enough. She stood up and looked at him. This part fails. Mid-trap, you're not walking away. Chen nodded. I know. Then he asked the question that changed everything. You ever fly? Keller froze, just for a second. Then she turned away and started disconnecting the actuator assembly. The crew chief approached, annoyed. We don't have time for this. The part was cleared. Keller didn't look up. The part was cleared wrong. The chief raised his voice. You don't have the authority to ground a strike asset. Chen stepped between them. She does now. The chief stared at him. You're out of your mind. Chen's voice dropped low. I've flown with bad parts before. Lost a wingman that way. I'm not doing it again. The deck went quiet. Even the jet noise seemed to fade. Keller finished removing the actuator, stood up, and handed it to the chief. Replace it. 20-minute job if you don't argue. The chief looked at the CAG, who had just arrived on deck. The CAG looked at Keller. Then he looked at the part in the chief's hand. He didn't need a UV light to see the fracture. It was there, faint. But there, he exhaled slowly. Do it. At 2:34 a.m., Hornet 311 launched. Clean, flawless. The tailhook caught. Wire 3 on recovery 6 hours later, without incident. Mission success. 0 casualties. And when Chen climbed out of the cockpit, sweating, exhausted, he walked straight to the maintenance bay and found Keller refueling a power cart. He didn't salute, didn't shake her hand, just said, "Thank you." She nodded once. Then she went back to work, but someone else had been watching. A senior officer standing in the shadows of the hangar bay, arms crossed, eyes locked on Keller. He'd seen her move, seen the way she handled the actuator, seen the precision, the confidence, the reflex memory of someone who had done this before, not as a mechanic, as something else. He waited until she was alone. Then he approached, quietly, carefully. "You're Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keller, aren't you?" She didn't turn around, just kept working. "That name doesn't exist anymore." He stepped closer. "VX-23, test pilot. Pox River. You were flying experimental fly-by-wire systems 3 years ago. When your wingman went down, her hands stopped moving. She set down the wrench slowly. What do you want?" He held out a folder. Classified, red stripe across the top. "Your file says you voluntarily surrendered your wings after the accident. Requested a transfer to aviation maintenance. Reduced in rank from O4 to E5. No one understood why." She finally looked at him. "Because I didn't want to kill anyone else." He shook his head. "You didn't kill him. The hydraulic system failed. The ejection seat malfunctioned. You did everything right." She turned away. "I missed the pre-flight. I should have caught it. You caught it tonight." Silence. The hangar bay hummed with distant machinery. Somewhere above, another jet launched into the black sky. He opened the folder. Inside was a photo. Her and Lieutenant Jake Rourke. Call sign Wizard. Both in flight suits. Standing beside an FA-18 with experimental control surfaces. Smiling. Young. Alive. She stared at the photo. Then she closed the folder. "I don't fly anymore." He nodded. "I know, but you're still saving lives. 11 pilots in the last 2 years. 11 failures you caught that no one else would have seen. You're doing more good here than you ever did in the cockpit." She didn't answer. Just picked up her wrench and went back to work. But that night, after the flight deck went quiet and the last jet was chained down, she stood alone in the maintenance bay and looked at her reflection in the polished steel of a Hornet's fuselage. Behind her ear, barely visible under her collar, was a tattoo. Faded, worn, but still there. Phoenix, the call sign she'd earned at PAX. River, the call sign that was supposed to die with her career. The call sign that only a handful of people in the Navy even knew existed. She touched it once. Then she turned off the lights and disappeared into the ship's corridors. Just another mechanic in grey coveralls, carrying the weight of wings she would never wear again. But the next morning, when the air wing assembled for the debrief, the CAG stood at the podium and said something no one expected. "Last night, a member of this crew saved a pilot's life. Not with a gun, not with a radio, with a flashlight and the courage to say no. That takes more guts than most of us will ever have." He paused, and to Keller, front and center. She didn't move at first. Then, slowly, she stood and walked to the front of the room. Every pilot in the squadron stared. Some in confusion, some in respect. Chen stood in the back, arms crossed, nodding once. The CAG held out a Navy commendation. Medal for exceptional performance in the line of duty. She took it without a word. Then she walked back to her seat and sat down, eyes forward, face unreadable. But Chen saw it. The way her hand shook slightly when she held the medal. The way she blinked twice, fast, like she was fighting something back. The way she gripped the armrest a little too tight. After the debrief, he followed her outside. She was standing on the catwalk, staring out at the ocean, wind pulling at her hair. "You were a test pilot." She didn't turn. Once. "Why'd you leave?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Because I couldn't save him. But maybe I can save the rest of you." Chen nodded. "You already have." She finally looked at him. Why'd you trust me? He smiled faintly. Because 6 months ago, you caught a stress fracture in my tail hook that would have killed me. And you didn't ask for anything. Didn't want credit. Just fixed it and walked away. That's when I knew you weren't just a mechanic. She turned back to the ocean. I'm not a pilot anymore, either. Chen stepped beside her. Maybe not, but you're still one of us. And for the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to believe it. The deployment continued. The air wing launched 47 more sorties over the next 2 weeks. Keller inspected every single jet personally, not because she was ordered to, because she couldn't stop herself. Every hydraulic line, every actuator, every bolt and seal. She checked them all, twice. The crew started calling her Ghost, not because she was invisible, but because she moved like someone who had seen death and refused to let it happen again. One night, a young pilot asked her, "Is it true you used to fly?" She didn't answer, just handed him a pre-flight checklist and said, "Make sure you read every line. Your life depends on it." He did, and when he came back 6 hours later, alive, unharmed, mission complete, he found her in the hangar bay, wrench in hand, and said, "Thank you." She nodded, "Just doing my job." But they both knew it was more than that, because some people don't serve for recognition. They serve because they can't stop. Because every jet that launches safely is a life that didn't end the way Jake's did. Because every pilot who comes home is another chance to prove that the past doesn't have to define the future. Sarah Keller never wore her wings again. Never flew another mission. Never told anyone the full story of what happened that day at Pax River, when the sky turned red and her wingman didn't answer the radio. But she didn't need to, because every night, when the last jet trapped and the flight deck went silent, she stood alone in the hangar bay and whispered the same 5 words. "I'm still here. Jake, still here." And somewhere, in the steel and steam and endless ocean, his memory flew on. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone who carried a past they never spoke about? Someone who saved lives quietly, without medals, without recognition, just because they couldn't stop? Tell us their story in the comments. Share their name. Because here at the Human Stories, we honor the ones who serve in silence. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe and help us keep these voices alive. And remember, the next time you see someone working quietly in the background, look closer. You might be standing next to a legend who just doesn't wear their wings anymore. The Abraham Lincoln returned to port 3 months later. The pier was crowded with families, children holding signs, flags waving. Chen found Keller on the pier, slipping away quietly with a maintenance crew. No family waiting, just a sea bag over her shoulder. He jogged over. "Hey, you leaving already?" She turned. "Deployment's over." He pulled out a wooden box. Inside was Jake's challenge coin from VX-23, engraved with a single word, Phoenix. This belonged to Jake. His family wanted someone who understood. She stared at the coin. Her hand trembled. "Why me?" "Because you're still flying. Just not the way you thought you would." She closed her fingers around it. "Thank you. Take care of yourself, Ghost. You too, Reaper." 3 months later, she received a letter. No return address. Postmark from Pax River. Inside was a photograph. Her and Jake, standing beside the experimental Hornet, both grinning, both believing they were invincible. On the back, 5 words. You kept us all flying. She pinned it above her workbench at Naval Air Station, Oceana, and went back to work. Because that's what legends do. They don't stop. They just keep saving lives, one inspection at a time, refusing to let the past repeat itself. And that was enough. The years passed quietly. Keller rotated through 3 more carriers, 2 shore stations, and 1 classified deployment to the Middle East that never appeared on her service record. She never stopped inspecting jets, never stopped catching failures, never stopped refusing to let another pilot die because someone missed a detail by her 7th year as a mechanic. Her reputation had spread beyond the fleet. Senior inspectors requested her by name. Squadron commanders asked for her specifically before high-risk missions. Pilots who had never met her knew the stories. The ghost, the mechanic who used to fly, the woman who saw death in metal before it happened, but she never talked about it, never corrected anyone, never confirmed the rumors, just showed up at 4 a.m. every morning, tools in hand, and did the work at Naval Air Station Oceana. 6 months later, at 5:30 a.m., she was alone in Hangar Bay for rebuilding a fuel pump. The hangar was silent except for the hum of overhead lights and distant jets taxiing outside. She worked methodically, hands moving with practiced precision. Then footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate, not the hurried pace of deck crew. These steps carried weight. She didn't look up, just kept working. The footsteps stopped beside her workbench. "You don't remember me?" She paused, set down her wrench, looked up. Commander David Raw, Jake's older brother, graying at the temples now, lines carved deep around his eyes. The last time she'd seen him was at the funeral 7 years ago. Standing in the rain beside a flag-draped coffin, she stood slowly. "Sadot," he shook his head. "Don't. I'm not here as a commander." She waited, uncertain what to say. Rourke looked at the fuel pump on her bench. "Still fixing things?" She nodded once. "It's what I do." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, old, creased. He handed it to her. She unfolded it carefully. A letter, Jake's handwriting. Her breath caught. He wrote it 2 days before the test flight. "Gave it to me. Said if anything happened, I should give it to you." She stared at the letter. Her hands shook. 3 paragraphs. Every word a punch. "Sarah, if you're reading this, it wasn't your fault. We both knew the risks. We both signed up for this. You're the best pilot I've ever known. Don't let this stop you. Don't let my death ground you. Keep flying. For both of us." Jake, she folded it slowly, hands trembling. She couldn't speak, just stood there. He didn't blame you. None of us did. She finally looked up, eyes red but dry. "I blamed myself, I know. That's why you gave up your wings." She set the letter down carefully, like it was sacred. "I couldn't fly anymore. Not after watching him die." Rourke nodded. "But you didn't stop serving. You just changed the mission." She didn't answer, just turned back to the fuel pump, picked up her wrench. But her hands were steadier now. Rourke placed a small velvet box on the bench beside the letter. "Open it when you're ready." He walked away, footsteps echoing through the empty hangar. She worked for another hour before she stopped, stared at the box, then slowly opened it. Inside were Jake's wings, gold, worn, the ones she thought had been buried with him. Underneath, an engraved plate, "Still flying, just differently. She closed the box, held it against her chest, and for the first time in 7 years, she let herself cry. 2 months later, she received orders. Naval Air Systems Command, Patuxent River, Maryland. The same base where she and Jake had flown, where he had died. She almost refused. But then she remembered the letter. Don't let this stop you, so she went. Pax River looked the same. Same runways. Same hangars. But everything felt heavier now. Haunted. Her assignment, aviation maintenance liaison for experimental flight test operations. Inspect test aircraft. Coordinate with engineers. Provide technical feedback. A desk job with a toolbox. Except it wasn't simple. Because every time a test pilot walked past, she saw Jake. Every time a Hornet launched, she heard his last radio call. Every time she inspected hydraulics, she wondered if she'd missed something again. But she didn't stop. Just kept working. 3 weeks in, a test pilot approached after a pre-flight inspection. Young, cocky, reminded her of Jake in all the wrong ways. He grinned. Heard you used to fly. She didn't look up. Once, why'd you stop? She met his eyes. Because I wasn't good enough to save my wingman. His grin faded. He opened his mouth. Closed it. She handed him the checklist. Your jet's clean. Don't waste it. He took it. Nodded slowly. Walked away that night. She stood on the flight line watching sunset over the Chesapeake Bay. The same flight line where she and Jake had stood 7 years ago. Laughing, planning their next test flight, believing they were invincible. She pulled Jake's wings from her pocket, held them up to the fading light. Gold still gleaming, engraving still sharp. LTJG, Jake Rourke. Naval aviator, she whispered to the empty sky. I'm still here, Jake, still flying, just like you said. And somewhere, in the wind and distant jet engines, she thought she heard him answer. Good, don't stop. She never did. 4 years later, at 6:12 a.m., Chief Petty Officer Keller stood on the USS Gerald R. Ford, 41 now, still turning wrenches, hair grayed, hands scarred, but eyes still sharp. The carrier was deployed in the Arabian Gulf, continuous flight operations. That morning, she inspected Cat 2. The crew reported a pressure anomaly. Probably nothing. But Keller didn't believe in probably. She climbed into the catapult trough. Tight space. Hot metal. Flashlight in her teeth. Checking every line, every valve, every seal. Then she found it. Hairline crack in the steam manifold. At launch pressure, it would rupture. Explosion, 20 dead. She keyed her radio. Chief Keller to control. Shut down Cat 2. Code red. Say again, Chief. Affirmative. Manifold crack. If we launch, it blows. Pause. The air boss. Chief, we have a strike package in 14 minutes. Sir, if you launch on this Cat, you won't have a flight deck. Longer. Pause. Copy. Cat 2 down. You have 90 minutes. Her team worked in silence. 400 pounds of steel and valves. Precise alignment. One mistake, catastrophe. Finished with 11 minutes to spare. Air boss, Cat to green. Final inspection. Every bolt. Every seal, affirmative. Cat 2 is green. Good work, Chief. 2 days later, the strike group commander walked in at 20 to 30 hours. 2-star admiral. Rarely left operations. Chief Keller. She stood, sir, I read the report. You saved 20 lives. She nodded. How'd you see it? Inspectors cleared it. Sensor was off by 3 psi. Felt wrong. So I looked. Most wouldn't bother. 3 psi is acceptable. Not when acceptable kills someone. He nodded. 14 years. 47 failures caught. 63 lives saved. Never promoted past E7. Never requested recognition. I don't do this for commendation, sir. I know. But you're getting one. Navy and Marine Corps medal. He pinned it without ceremony. I also saw your flight records. VX-23, test pilot. You were one of the best. She stiffened. Long time ago, Sir Dot. You traded wings for something more important. You're still saving lives. Just from the ground. She looked at the medal. Heavy, heavier than Jake's wings, in her pocket. The Admiral saluted. She returned it. He walked away. That night, alone in her rack, she held Jake's wings beside the medal. Both symbols of service. Both earned differently. I'm still here, Jake. Still flying this time. She believed it. The deployment ended 3 months later. Ford returned to Norfolk at 8:45 a.m. Pier crowded with families. Keller walked off with maintenance crew, sea bag. Over shoulder, at the pier's end, stood Commander David Rourke. Beside him, 12 others. Chen, the Pax River pilot. Catapult crew. Air boss, all of them, single line, silent. Rourke stepped forward. They wanted to be here. Wanted you to know you didn't stop flying. You changed the mission. And because of that, all of us are alive. Chen, you saved my life 6 years ago. Pax River pilot, flew 180 missions. Came home every time. Because of you, one by one, you caught the failure no one saw. You refused bad parts. You taught quiet service. Rourke handed her a folded flag. Jake's flag. He wanted you to have this. For the person still carrying the mission, she took it. First time in 14 years, she believed she'd done enough. Next morning, new assignment. Naval Air Systems Command. Instructor, training the next generation. 7:30 a.m. 23 students waiting. She stood at the front. 5 words. This job will save lives. Sarah Keller never wore her wings again. Never flew another mission. Never told the full story of what happened when Jake died. But she didn't need to, because every pilot who came home, every jet that launched safely, every failure she caught, told the story for her. And somewhere, in the wind and the distant sound of jet engines, Jake was still flying, right beside her, always.